Hi, everybody. Welcome to class today. We are going to talk about inequality, women, and femininities. So these are our discussion questions for today. We've got 8 of them. We're going to talk about feminine apologetic, emphasize femininity, empathetic sameness, gender equivocation, the matrix of domination, patriarchal bargain, and why women do it, the difference between sexism and benevolent sexism, and the double bind. So just like the last chapter, we start with kind of a history of NFL cheerleaders or cheerleaders in general. And so one of the things that Lisa Wade wanted to point out was, the pay differentiation. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a context, Travis Kelsey, I think is his name. I don't know. I don't follow sports. Sorry. Said that he was underpaid in an interview that he did, and his annual salary is approximately $14 million. His contract with the Chiefs granted him about a $65 million salary over his 4-year contract. And then also to put in context, if you take like the average NFL team and how much they're valued, you're looking at approximately $5 billion per team is how much they're worth. The league is each league is worth about $163 billion, and that's according to Forbes in 2023. So let's put this in context. If we look at elite main cheerleaders, not the supporting cheerleaders, they today, as of 2023, make about $30 an hour. Their match fees, they tend to earn about $500 per match fee, somewhere around $7,000, $6,500 for a season income. If they do a public appearance, they get about $50 to $75 for that public appearance. So their average salary is about $22,000. I couldn't find all of the information for supporting cheerleaders, but we know they make approximately $12 to $15 an hour as of right now, between $100 and $200 per match fee, and approximately $2,000 per season income. I couldn't find an annual income for them. And keep in mind, they also have to pay for a lot of their things, like their pom-poms and their outfits and that kind of thing. So the reason why this is brought up as a comparison, our valuation of work and sport and activities that women do as compared to men can be quite extreme, and cheerleading is a very good example of that. So let's talk about hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. First, I want to read you this note that I found online. It was for a waitress. And so it said basically, "Dear waitress, thank you for this excellent service today. You're a good waitress. Now, here is your tip. A woman's place is in the home. Your place is in the home. It even says so in the Bible. You may think that you're contributing to your household by coming into work, but you are not. While you are here, while you are working, this is the reason your husband must see another woman on his way home from a long day at his work, because you should be home taking care of the household. But you're not. While you're here working, this is the reason your husband must see another woman. Because you should make the home and take care of the household duties. You may think that what you're doing is working. It is really essentially a disgrace to his manhood and to the American family. So instead of coming to your quote-unquote job and looking for handouts to feed your family, how about going home and cleaning your house and cooking a hot meal for your husband?" This is the way your husband and God intended. And help make America great again. Praying for families, our nation, and our nation. Love, and then whatever that person's name was. So I wanted to read this to you. We're starting to see more and more of this, right? And so this kind of gives us a good example of the hostile sexism that women may encounter, and you're starting to see more of it in the media. This was directed obviously to a waitress. It was a tip left for a waitress, and she had posted it online. And when we think about sexism, we think about really this direct, aggressive type of sexism. And so we actually assume that that's really the only type of sexism in a lot of ways. Um, and, and we think often that if we don't see the negative stereotypes, the threat of violence, the threatening for, putting women, quote unquote, in their place to making them subservient, that we're not really seeing sexism. Let me kind of explain a different type of sexism to you. Another type of sexism that we see that is more common is the attribution of positive traits to women, but also those positive traits are used to justify subordination to men. Now, my husband works in construction, in the construction industry, and he actually sees this quite often. So generally, he says there's two types of women. Not really that they're different types of women, but they're perceived as different. And the way that they're treated is significantly different because one set of women is treated with quite a bit of hostile sexism, while the other set of women is treated with often quite a bit of benevolent sexism. Now, the two different types, as if you want to call it that, he says that if you're not very pretty, if you're not good looking, you're not skinny, or if you happen to be kind of a butch lesbian, men are aggressive, hostile, or they refuse to speak to you. They make your job more difficult. And this is my husband talking about the other men in his field, the other construction men that he works with. However, if you happen to be a good looking woman, the guys, he said, will literally go out of their way to help these women to do their job in a way that they would never help anybody else. But then once they've finished helping them, the men, and been super nice to these women, the men will say, see, this is why women shouldn't be in construction, and this is why they don't belong in the workplace, because they can't do their jobs themselves. They're not fit, they can't carry the weight, or they can't do that particular job. That is a better example of benevolent sexism. Now I have a picture for you here, and this is the picture my husband took. It says women in the workplace. Women in construction is actually what it says. So what we're starting to see is actually, since the pandemic, there's a lot more women who've moved into construction. People use that money that they got from the government to move out of really horrible, poor paying jobs and to find new jobs, either to get retrained or to be able to look for a better job. And because of that, we've seen a huge influx of women into construction work because women were realizing that they're better paid in construction, and that it was a better career path than a lot of the dead-end service industry jobs that they were in before. At the same time, we have seen a lot of men, or people in general, we say people, but there's a lot less men in the construction industry. What they mean by that is there's not enough workers to go around. And so because our culture has devalued blue collar labor overall, and acted as though it was not something that is a good career path, we see less people in general going into construction. but now we're starting to see more and more women going into construction. But women, especially as women are entering into this workforce and that particular workforce, and as it's still male dominated, they're encountering either hostile sexism, whether it's like direct aggressiveness. They might get shunned. So a lot of women, men won't speak to them at all, won't make eye contact, won't even communicate with them when it's necessary for the job, or might be outright aggressive, either sexually aggressive or physically aggressive towards these women. Or they're experiencing benevolent sexism, where they are being, kind of showered with attention and, made out to be like, this is, these are positive traits, but those traits that they're being told that they have are still being used to justify subordination within that field or to men in general. So why do we talk about these types of sexism and then the importance of balance? So one of the things that is discussed in this chapter is how women are expected to be both feminine and masculine. That women are expected to be essentially an ideal woman. So an ideal woman is really good at performing masculinity and femininity in a balanced way. So this picture over here to the right is a good example. It is acceptable to lift weights as long as you're lifting weights and wearing makeup and still looking feminine the way that it's appropriate for a cultural context that satisfies the male gaze. But if women don't do that, they could be considered to be outside of that gendered boundary, and they might be aggressively policed. What's called pariah femininities. Excuse the typo, pariah femininities, and that's a way of being a woman that might threaten male dominance, either too strong looking, too much power, too much money. Any of the ways that might threaten male dominance is considered a pariah femininity. So what we expect is more of a feminine apologetic, and that is the requirement that women are supposed to balance the appropriate form of masculinity and femininity. So what we end up doing is something called a patriarchal bargain. And a patriarchal bargain is a bargain that either a person or a woman makes, that she uses her access to power or resources, and she trades that access to power or resources for helping to keep other people in their place. So maybe a woman who is in a position of power at a job might help to continue to oppress other women under her. And in return, she gets a bargain, and that bargain is she gets access to power and money through her position. But that's not the only type of patriarchal bargain that emerges. You can see three main types of patriarchal bargains that are available to women in terms of how we represent our femininity. That can be emphasized femininity, empathetic sameness, or gender equivocation. So remember, we're doing that kind of half, both masculine and feminine traits, right? Because you kind of don't win if you're overly masculine or overly feminine. You tend to be more gender policed if that's the case. And you tend to lose access to resources if you are overly masculine or overly feminine in our current society. So an emphasized femininity It just is the exaggerated form of femininity. So it's the way you might orientate yourself to accommodating male interests or a particular male. And you do that to gain favor. So portraying as ultra feminine, maybe ultra weak or ultra subservient, so that you can gain access to resources, like somebody taking care of you financially or doing work for you. Empathetic sameness is the just being one of the guys, and so that's a way that we can do that we do possibly a patriarchal bargain. Um, and you kind of know what that is, right? So that's the, acting as though you have a lot in common with the gentleman around you, while still trying to portray femininity. Because remember, if it goes too far, you're still going to get gender policed. Gender equivocation is using both strategies when they're useful and culturally expected. That's a form of cultural traveling. In other words, you play the emphasized femininity when it works best for your situation, and the being one of the guys or empathetic sameness when that is best for your situation. Both of those are used to gain access to resources. What emerges, though, based on our culture, is what's called the double bind. A double bind is any situation or societal expectation where you have a contradiction. So if you satisfy one component of the expectation, you essentially fail at the other component. A good example of that is to be powerful as a woman me is to fail at femininity. To be a feminine woman is to give up your power, right? So you're satisfying one component while at the same time failing at the other component. So when women make a patriarchal bargain, they're usually doing that so that they can increase their independence, or increase their well-being, in especially in context of sexism or a form of benevolent sexism. Um, Castor Semenya is a really good example of this. You can see a depiction of her here on the right, and she's emphasizing her femininity. And one of the reasons why this is the case is because she received an extreme amount of gendered policing and criticism and threats of violence because she looked masculine, because she was a threat to the idea of female subordination, especially um, in the context of sports, right? So she was accused of being a man. She was threatened. People threatened to push her out. They wanted her to submit to medical procedures to prove she was a woman. I mean, it was quite aggressively, she was quite aggressively gender policed. Um, when you do perform femininity, in general, those women tend to be much more liked, more well liked, especially on the job. But at the same time, they're seen as less competent. So the example I was giving earlier about the construction, the women who work within the construction field that my husband tells me about, those women are liked. They are spoken to, people smile at them, people engage with them, but they're seen as not belonging on the job or not being competent at their job. Whereas the women who are, he says often on the larger side. So if you're not skinny, or if you're muscular, or if you happen to be a lesbian, you're not performing femininity in the way that is expected, those women are regarded as competent, like they can do their job, but they're not liked. They're not well liked. So it's kind of a, as Lisa Wade puts it, a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. So kind of going out to a larger lens and talking about it from a macro level perspective, if we talk about feminism, so traditional, structural, formal feminism, the definition essentially is that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. Um, there are different types of feminism. Um, you can believe that men and women should have equal rights under the law, but not culturally or socially. Or you could believe that men and women should have equal rights under the law and culturally and socially. If you believe the latter, you're actually a radical feminist. And so feminism, unlike what we might hear in kind of common everyday language, it's not the idea that women should be over men. It's the idea that men and women should essentially have equality, either equality under the law or equality under the law and socially. Today, we have kind of what's called a stalled revolution. So yes, women have embraced opportunities in areas like construction, right? So women are increasingly moving into what we call masculine workplaces, or taking on masculine attributes or hobbies. However, what we don't have is men who have moved towards the feminine option. And that goes back to what we had said in prior chapters. It's socially acceptable in our culture for women to take on masculine attributes because masculine attributes are considered to be more valuable, more worthy, whereas feminine attributes are to be avoided at all costs. And so we don't really have a sense of equality, because while women can still are allowed the freedom to access male attributes and sometimes even male jobs, men don't have that freedom. If men want to, they are still extremely socially gender policed and criticized and sometimes violently attacked if they attach themselves or to feminine attributes or display feminine attributes or take on a feminine job. And that's because we're still trying to, in some ways, maintain that matrix of domination in regards to a gendered matrix of domination. And that's that creation and the idea and the belief, right? And the actual construction of the social structure, right? So the social structure intersects all these different hierarchies, whether that's race or class, sexuality, your sex, right? And it creates a pyramid of privilege for people. Those privileges result in extensive privileges for just a very few people, but create a pyramid of access to resources or privileges for a larger percentage of people, until you get down into the bottom levels where those people, who are most people, they have very select, very few access to resources and privileges. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the short lecture. This is our writing workshop. And that's the question we would revisit. So that's kind of your thought-provoking question. Have a wonderful day, and good luck on the quiz.